Ethan Carter never imagined his life would unravel on a Wednesday. He was 34, just old enough to think he'd learned what loyalty looked like. His wife, Lena, was 32, the first girl who ever made him believe forever wasn't just something people said when they were young and foolish. For 5 years, Ethan thought they were fine. Not perfect, who really is? But fine. Mortgage, Sunday brunches, the quiet way she curled her feet under his thigh on the couch. He believed in the life they'd built, believed in the steady beat of ordinary love. It started with a phone that buzzed too late at night. Lena's laughter that died too quickly when he walked into the room. An unfamiliar cologne on her coat that she blamed on crowded elevators at work. At first, Ethan wanted to be wrong more than he wanted the truth. He swallowed the doubts like stale coffee. But suspicion, once it finds a crack, grows roots. He found the hidden messages in her old phone. Not all at once, but piece by piece, until they spelled out a betrayal too ugly to deny. Lena had been seeing someone named Ryan Hale, 29, an old friend she'd run into at the grocery store, or so she'd said the first time. A harmless catch-up, she claimed, just coffee, she promised. But the text told the real story. 5 years of hidden meetups, weekend trips she pretended were for work, cheap motels a few towns over. Ethan sat alone in their kitchen when it all sank in. Her ring left on the counter next to her keys one night when she didn't come home. The TV still hummed an old sitcom into the empty room, the laugh track mocking him. He could have confronted her. He could have thrown her stuff onto the lawn and changed the locks. But Ethan wanted her to feel the weight of it. He wanted her to stand in the wreckage she'd made, not slip away untouched. So he did the one thing Lena never expected. He called Ryan Hale. Ethan didn't know what he expected Ryan Hale to sound like when he finally answered. Maybe cocky, maybe smug, maybe the kind of smooth voice that could talk a married woman into hiding parts of herself for half a decade. But when Ryan picked up, his voice cracked around the edges, like he hadn't slept much either. Hello. Hesitant, almost boyish. Ethan could hear traffic in the background, the hollow echo of a man walking alone. Ryan Hale. Ethan asked. His own voice surprised him. Calm, even, like he was reading from a script. Yeah, who's this? It's Ethan, Lena's husband. Silence, thick enough to drown in. A car horn bleated far away, and Ryan's breath hitched like he'd just remembered how to breathe. I didn't know. Ryan started, but his words tangled up. Didn't know what? Ethan wondered. Didn't know she was married? Didn't know it was this deep? Ethan pressed the phone tighter to his ear, staring at the faded photo of Lena pinned to their fridge. Her grin wide, her eyes bright, a woman who'd promised him forever. I think you didn't know, but maybe you didn't know the whole story. Ryan didn't argue, just the shuffle of his footsteps, the rustle of wind through the receiver. Meet me, Ethan said. He didn't ask. He didn't beg. He just laid out flat. Tonight, let's get this straight. What? Ryan asked. But it was the kind of question that had already answered itself. Ethan let out a dry laugh. Because she lied to you too. And if you want to see exactly what you've been to her, you'll show up. He gave Ryan the name of a bar on the edge of town. The one with the neon sign that buzzed half the letters out on rainy nights. A place where secrets could live and die without anyone caring enough to look closer. After he hung up, Ethan sat at the kitchen table for a long time, the cold sink dripping in the background. He stared at the empty chair across from him and tried to remember when Lena stopped sitting there just to talk to him. He couldn't. Maybe that was the worst part. He didn't want revenge. Not exactly. But he wanted the truth in the open, raw and ugly. So they could both bleed in the daylight, him and Ryan. And maybe, if he was honest, so she couldn't run from it anymore. Outside, thunder rolled low over the rooftops. Ethan grabbed his keys, locking the door behind him like he was sealing off a version of himself he'd never get back. The bar was half empty when Ethan pushed through the heavy door. Neon beer signs glowed above cracked vinyl booths, sticky tables littered with half-finished drinks and forgotten conversations. It was the kind of place where people went to disappear, where secrets slipped through the floorboards with the spilled whiskey. Ethan slid onto a stool near the back, close enough to the shadows to watch the door without being watched himself. He ordered a whiskey he wouldn't finish and let the glass sweat in his hand, cold against the warmth burning up his neck. When Ryan Hale walked in, Ethan almost didn't recognize him. He expected someone sharper, cockier, but Ryan looked like a man trying to outrun his own reflection. He was younger, sure, but the worry had already hollowed his eyes. He spotted Ethan immediately, hesitated by the jukebox, then forced himself forward like a man stepping on a thin ice. They didn't shake hands, didn't nod, just stared at each other for a heartbeat that stretched too long. Ryan sat down, cleared his throat. Does Lena know you called me? Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in it, just something brittle and sour. No, she's probably at your place right now, waiting to tell you another lie. Ryan winced. He rubbed his palms on his jeans. Look, man, I swear, I didn't know she was married. Not at first. Ethan tilted his head. And after? Ryan's mouth opened, closed, opened again. He looked like he wanted to dig a hole under the bar and bury himself in it. After, she said you didn't love her, that you were cold, controlling. Ethan raised an eyebrow. He wondered how many versions of himself Lena had painted to justify her secret life. He wondered if he'd ever see the real truth under all that paint. I didn't come here to fight you, Ethan said finally. He leaned in, voice low enough to drown under the jukebox's sad country ballad. I came here to make sure you know exactly who she is, and what she's done. Ryan's eyes flicked to the door like he half expected Lena to burst in and drag him out by the collar. He looked smaller now, the secret lover stripped down to just a scared kid in a bar he never wanted to be in. Ethan took a slow sip of the whiskey, letting it burn all the way down. I say we don't let her keep running. Not this time. Ryan's eyes met his, confusion, regret, and something like reluctant agreement pooling behind the fear. All right, Ryan said, voice quiet but certain. Tell me what you have in mind. And for the first time in days, Ethan felt the numbness crack, just enough to let something sharper through, a purpose, an ugly kind of justice waiting to be served. Ryan's apartment was just outside town, a squat brick complex with cracked sidewalks and weeds fighting through the concrete. The kind of place where secrets felt safe because nobody bothered to look too close. They pulled in a few minutes apart. Ryan parked under the single flickering lamp by the stairs, Ethan's old pickup rumbling to a stop beside him. For a moment, neither of them moved, just two silhouettes behind fog glass, staring at the building that had been Lena's second life for too long. Ryan stepped out first. He shoved his hands deep into his jacket pockets like they might hide the guilt clinging to his bones. Ethan slammed his door shut, boots crunching over grit and frost. You sure about this? Ryan asked, voice low. Ethan didn't answer right away. He glanced up, saw the pale yellow glow behind Ryan's living room blinds. She's in there, warm, waiting, smiling at her own lies. He clenched his jaw. I'm done pretending I'm the fool, Ethan said. If you're not, you can leave. Ryan didn't move. He swallowed, then nodded, and led Ethan up the crooked metal stairs that moaned under their weight. Each step felt heavier than the last. At Ryan's door, they paused. From inside, they could hear soft music playing, something calm and pretty that didn't fit the ugliness waiting outside. Lena's laugh floated out, muffled through the thin wood. She was on the phone, her voice drifting between sweet and sharp, the way Ethan had heard it so many nights when she thought he was asleep. Ryan's knuckles hovered over the door. He looked back at Ethan, the man he'd stolen a wife from, the man who should hate him enough to swing first. You want me to? Ethan shook his head. He reached past Ryan, rapped 3 quick knocks that silenced the room inside like a switch flipped. Footsteps. A pause. The chain slid. And then Lena swung the door open, her smile halfway formed until her eyes flicked from Ryan to Ethan. All the color drained from her face. Her lips parted, a soft gasp that held no apology, just panic. Ethan, what? She stammered. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, brushing past her perfume that now smelled like cheap excuses. Ryan followed, closing the door behind them both. The soft music still played from the corner speaker, absurdly gentle under the weight of 3 broken truths standing in the same shabby living room. Ethan turned, met Lena's wide eyes, and felt a strange calm settle in his chest. For the first time in years, there were no secrets left to swallow. Go on, Lena, he said, his voice so quiet it cut deeper than any shout. Tell him the truth. Tell us both who you really are. Lena stood frozen in the middle of Ryan's cluttered living room, one hand still gripping the edge of the door like she might slam it shut and erase what she'd just let in. Her hair was damp, freshly washed, like she planned a night that would smell of new beginnings and whispered lies. Ryan stepped past her, planting himself near the window, his arms crossed tight over his chest, not to look strong, but to keep from shaking. Ethan stayed closer to the door, blocking it, a silent promise she wasn't going to slip away into the night this time. "Ethan, please," Lena started, her voice soft, measured, the same tone she'd used to talk him down from arguments that never touched the real fight. "This isn't what you think." Ethan barked out a short laugh. Don't insult me more than you already have." She looked at Ryan then, eyes wide, pleading. "Ryan, I was going to tell you." "Tell me what?" Ryan's voice cracked on the question. "That you had a husband you never left. That I was just, what, a game? A secret?" Lena's mouth worked, but no words came. She dropped her gaze to the carpet, her fingers twisting in the hem of her sweater like she might unravel herself just to find the right lie buried deep inside. Ethan stepped closer, his presence steady, unflinching. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The weight of everything unsaid filled the room tighter than any scream could. "You played us both," he said. 5 years, Lena. 5 years of splitting your life in half, lying to him, lying to me. Did it feel good? Did it feel powerful? She flinched like he'd slapped her, but she didn't deny it. Her shoulders sagged under the truth she could no longer hide behind pretty words. Ryan let out a breath that sounded like a broken laugh. "You said you loved me. You said you were leaving him for me." Lena's head snapped up, desperate. "I did love you. I do." Ryan cut her off with a sharp shake of his head. "No, you love the lie. You love what you got from it." For a heartbeat, all three stood there. Ethan by the door, Ryan by the window, Lena stranded in the middle of the tiny living room that suddenly felt too small to hold what they'd built on secrets. Ethan stepped back, hand on the doorknob, his eyes locked on Lena's. "You don't come home tonight. Or ever. That house is mine again." Ryan spoke up, softer but with an edge that made Lena's knees wobble. "And you don't come here either. I'm done being your secret." Lena's breath caught in her throat, her eyes darting between the two men who, just hours ago, she thought she still owned with her half-smiles and quiet lies. But tonight, the door was open, and for once, it wasn't for her to slip through. Lena's legs seemed to give out all at once. She sank onto the worn arm of Ryan's old sofa, her shoulders hunched forward like she was trying to fold herself into something smaller than the truth surrounding her. Ethan watched her with a numb kind of pity, not for the woman she was now, but for the girl he'd fallen for a lifetime ago, who'd looked him in the eye and promised him loyalty she'd never meant to keep. Ryan leaned back against the window frame, arms crossed, eyes flicking to the floor as if he couldn't stand to see her now. The silence stretched thin and sharp between them, broken only by the hum of a refrigerator and the soft music still whispering through the speaker. Lena lifted her head, her eyes glassy with tears she hadn't bothered to shed when she'd walked out of Ethan's door so many nights before. "Where am I supposed to go?" she whispered. It wasn't a question meant for either of them, but the words clung to the air like a plea. Ethan almost laughed. Where's she supposed to go? He'd asked himself the same thing for weeks, wondering where she really was while he reheated dinner alone. "You'll figure it out," Ethan said. His voice was steady, stripped of bitterness, just cold, flat truth. "You always do." Ryan pushed himself off the wall, ran a hand through his hair. He looked at Ethan, then at Lena. "I'll give you tonight," he said quietly. "Pack whatever you need. But in the morning, you're out." Lena's mouth opened, closed. She looked like she might reach for Ryan's hand, but he stepped back, out of her reach before she could try. The rejection landed harder than any shout could have. Outside, the wind rattled the thin window pane, carrying the sounds of cars passing, people moving through their lives while hers fell apart in a dingy living room she'd once used as a secret haven. Ethan stepped to the door. He paused, his hand on the knob, his back to her. "For what it's worth," he said without turning around, "I hope you find whatever you thought you were missing." The lock clicked open. Cold air spilled in from the stairwell. He didn't look back when he stepped out. He didn't need to. Behind him, Ryan stayed silent, watching the woman who'd stolen 5 years from 2 lives at once. And Lena sat frozen under the weight of her own choices, alone in a room that suddenly didn't belong to her anymore. Out in the night, Ethan pulled in a deep breath that burned his lungs raw but clean. the first breath of freedom wrapped in betrayal's bitter aftertaste. Tomorrow would be ugly, but it would be honest. And that, for now, was enough. The cold hit Ethan the moment he stepped outside. A sharp gust sliced through his jacket, as if reminding him that freedom could sting just as much as betrayal. He stood by his truck for a moment, keys digging into his palm, eyes lifted to the blank sky above the apartment building's flickering streetlight. He should have felt triumphant, he thought. He'd exposed her lies, torn off the mask she'd worn for years. But all he felt was hollow, like every truth he'd forced into the light had also emptied something out of him. Inside Ryan's apartment, he knew Lena was probably crying now. Maybe she pleaded with Ryan one last time. Maybe she'd spin another story about how it wasn't her fault, how she'd been lost or lonely or misunderstood. Ethan almost pitied Ryan for the long night he'd have to get through, alone with her words that never really told the truth. He climbed into the truck, slammed the door shut, and let the engine rumble to life beneath him. The dashboard lights flickered on, a dull glow in the dark, ordinary and comforting in a way he hadn't felt in months. As he pulled away from the lot, Ethan's mind drifted to the house, his house now, the spare key she wouldn't need anymore, the bedroom that no longer smelled of her perfume, the bed where he'd lain awake for too many nights wondering if he was the problem. He wasn't. The thought steadied him as the road unspooled under his tires, mile after mile of quiet reckoning. He didn't go home immediately. Instead, he drove aimlessly through empty streets, past the gas station where he'd once bought her flowers, the diner where they'd spent lazy Sundays planning a future she'd never really wanted. Each landmark felt smaller now, stripped of the weight she'd given it. Eventually, he pulled into an all-night convenience store, the harsh fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. He didn't need anything, just wanted to stand under the bright aisles for a minute, surrounded by the hum of normal life. He grabbed a stale cup of coffee, paid in crumpled bills, and lingered by the window, watching his truck idle under the flickering sign. For the first time in a long time, he felt alone in a way that wasn't suffocating, alone in a way that might actually heal. Back at Ryan's place, Lena's night would stretch out like a punishment she'd written herself into. Tomorrow she'd wake up to an empty bed, 2 doors closed behind her, and no one left to believe her carefully spun lies. Ethan sipped his bitter coffee and let the warmth burn his tongue, a small reminder that sometimes pain was the only way to feel something real again. And when he finally stepped back into the cold night, he knew exactly where he was going next. Ethan's headlights cut through the sleeping neighborhood as he finally turned onto a street. Familiar houses sat in neat rows, windows glowing with late-night TV flickers or soft lamplight. Inside them, families lay curled under blankets, lives humming along with secrets he no longer had to carry. He parked at the curb instead of the driveway. Something about seeing her car spot empty made the moment feel more final, more real. He sat for a minute in the dark, engine ticking as it cooled, the smell of stale convenience store coffee still clinging to his jacket. Inside the house, it was exactly as he'd left it. Lena's half-drunk glass of wine on the counter, the picture frames along the hall still frozen in fake smiles. Ethan paused at one in particular, a photo from their anniversary trip to the coast, sun-soaked and laughing. He traced her face with his thumb, then set the frame down on its back. No more ghosts on the walls tonight. He poured the wine down the drain, rinsed the glass until it squeaked under his palm. He dumped her leftover dinner from the fridge too, every stale bite a reminder he didn't want. The small rituals steadied him, bit by bit. Upstairs, the bed waited, sheets tangled, her side still dented like she might slide back in any minute. He tugged them off, stripped the pillowcases, stuffed it all in a laundry basket he'd ignored for weeks. Tomorrow he'd buy new ones, ones that didn't smell like someone else's secrets. He dropped onto the bare mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling. Silence pressed close, but it didn't choke him this time. He let it in, let it settle. He thought of Ryan, probably sitting on his couch right now, while Lena packed a bag, spinning apologies she'd rehearsed in a dozen mirrors. Maybe Ryan would forgive her for a night. Maybe he wouldn't. Ethan didn't care anymore. What happened between them now wasn't his burden to carry. He closed his eyes, an ache blooming behind his ribs. Not pain exactly, but the slow stretch of something like relief. For the first time in 5 years, his life was his own again. Imperfect. Empty. but honest. In the quiet, Ethan felt a flicker of something almost warm, a promise he could start over, that the worst was done, and somewhere beyond the walls, tomorrow waited, blank and wide open. Morning came earlier than Ethan expected. He'd barely slept, just drifted in and out, dreams folding in on themselves like half-finished thoughts. But when the first weak light broke through the blinds, he felt oddly awake, as if his mind had been waiting for a reason to rise. Downstairs, the house felt too big for one person. Every creak of the floorboards reminded him how it used to echo with Lena's hurried footsteps, her humming from the bathroom, her voice calling his name when she needed something only he could fix. He brewed a fresh pot of coffee, stronger than the stale gas station sludge from the night before. The smell wrapped around him like something solid. He sipped it by the kitchen window, watching the street come alive. A kid waiting for the bus, a neighbor jogging with his dog, a couple bickering good-naturedly as they loaded groceries into the car. Ordinary life, a normal he'd envied without knowing it. His phone buzzed on the counter, Ryan's name glowing on the screen. Ethan hesitated. He'd half expected Ryan to vanish after last night, to cut ties and pretend none of this mess had splattered on his clean young life. But Ryan was still there, still part of this strange, bitter knot Lena had tied around them both. Ethan answered, "Yeah." Ryan's voice was rough with exhaustion. "She's gone," he said. No greeting, no small talk, just the truth, plain and sharp. Ethan let out a breath. "Where?" "No idea," Ryan said. "She packed a bag, cried a lot, said all the right things. But I told her I wasn't listening anymore. I made her call a cab. She's your ghost now, man, not mine." Ethan felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Not quite a smile, but close. "She's nobody's ghost anymore." Ryan was quiet on the other end. Then, "You okay?" Ethan looked around the kitchen, the sun hitting the countertop in soft stripes, the drip of coffee in the pot still warm. For the first time, his voice felt honest when he said, "Yeah, I think I will be." They talked a few more minutes. Awkward, but easy in a way Ethan hadn't expected. Two men who'd hated each other on principle just days ago, now tied together by the same wound. When they hung up, Ethan felt lighter, as if saying it out loud made the final cut clean. He dumped the last of his coffee and grabbed his keys. Today wasn't for sulking in a half-empty house that still smelled faintly of broken vows. Today was for starting something. Even if it was just a walk, a new set of sheets, a breakfast alone at the diner down the street. He stepped outside, locked the door behind him. No second key under the mat. No promise waiting at home that could turn into a lie overnight. Just Ethan. Just the road. Just the first honest day he'd had in far too long. Ethan pushed through the diner door just as the morning rush began to thin. The place was old, cracked linoleum floors, red vinyl booths patched with duct tape. But the coffee was hot, and the eggs were always cooked just right. And sometimes that was all a man needed when his whole life felt freshly scraped raw. A bell above the door jingled as he stepped inside. The waitress, Grace, gave him a curious look from behind the counter. She'd served him and Lena countless Saturday breakfasts over the years, sliding extra creamers his way with a wink, pretending not to notice the small tensions that simmered between them. He slid into a booth by the window. Grace approached, pencil tucked behind her ear. "Morning, Ethan," she said, voice gentle, like she could smell the storm still clinging to him. "Where's Lena today?" He felt the lie bubble up. She's home, sleeping in, or she's busy. But he didn't know that story anymore. Didn't know anyone the neat version. "Gone," he said simply. Grace's eyebrows shot up, but she didn't pry. Instead, she poured him a cup of coffee, steaming and strong. "Sorry, hon, you want the usual?" Ethan nodded. He wrapped his hands around the mug, letting the heat soak in his cold fingers. Outside the window, the town moved on without him. Cars idling at the light, kids squabbling over snacks at the corner store, life flowing past the mess he'd untangled the night before. His mind drifted to Ryan, to Lena, to the jagged pieces that still didn't quite fit back into the man he'd been before. He wondered where she was now. A bus station, a cheap motel, calling someone new, spinning the same old stories for fresh ears. He shook the thought off. It wasn't his problem anymore. She'd built her lies one brick at a time. She could live in the ruin of them alone. Grace slid his plate down in front of him. Scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, toast dripping butter. Normal. Solid. Exactly what he needed. "You want to talk?" she asked, voice soft. Ethan looked up at her kind eyes, the ones that had seen 100 people spill secrets into chipped mugs at 7 a.m. "Maybe later," he said. He meant it. Maybe one day he'd tell the whole thing, laugh about it over pie and cheap coffee refills. But not today. Today, he ate in silence. He savored each bite like a man who finally understood how to sit alone at a table without feeling empty. And as the sun climbed higher through the diner window, Ethan found something he hadn't tasted in years, a bite of freedom, warm on his tongue. When Ethan stepped out of the diner, the sky was high and sharp above him, cloudless, the kind of blue that made him feel both small and strangely unburdened. He tossed a polite wave to Grace through the window. She smiled back, a silent promise that next time, if he wanted to talk, she'd be there with a fresh pot ready. He slid into his truck, the warmth trapped inside from the morning sun. For a moment, he just sat there, fingers drumming on the wheel. He didn't have anywhere he had to be. No errands, no calls to dodge, no excuses to craft for where he'd been or who he'd been with. The blank stretch of the day was his, all his, and the thought was both terrifying and freeing. He pulled out of the diner lot, aimlessly at first, past the park where he and Lena used to walk their dog before she claimed she was too tired, past the tiny bookstore where he'd once hidden a ring box behind his back, grinning like a fool. Those memories stung a little, but they didn't feel poisoned anymore. They were just old echoes, reminders of a man who'd believed in something that hadn't believed in him back. He stopped at a red light, caught his own reflection in the rear view. He looked older than he'd felt last year, lines deeper around his eyes, hair just starting to silver at the temples. But there was something steadier there too, something settled. When the light turned green, he made a choice he hadn't planned. He turned off the main road, cutting down a side street that led to the local hardware store. It wasn't about nails or paint. It was about moving, about proving to himself he could still build something, fix something that was broken. Inside the store, he wandered the aisles like a man sifting through old blueprints of who he wanted to be. New locks for the doors Lena wouldn't darken again. Fresh paint to scrub away the shadows she'd left in every corner. Maybe a few tools he didn't need, but wanted. A promise that from now on, his house would be his alone to mend. At the checkout, the cashier, a teenager barely old enough to understand the way betrayal folds a man inside out, asked if he needed help loading it all up. Ethan just shook his head. "No, son, I got it." And he did. For the first time in years, he really did. By the time Ethan pulled into his driveway again, the sun was already beginning its slow slide toward afternoon. The back of his truck rattled with bags of paint, a new set of sturdy door locks, and a few tools he probably wouldn't even use today. But owning them felt like permission to start fresh. He stood in the open garage for a moment, just breathing in the quiet. No half-packed suitcase by the door, no faint scent of her perfume clinging to a coat she'd thrown over the banister. Just him and the echo of his own footsteps. Inside, he carried the paint cans to the hallway first. He set them down where the old wallpaper had begun to peel, a small, stupid reminder of how long he'd ignored the cracks because other things seemed more important. Or maybe he'd just been too busy pretending everything was fine. He popped open a can, stirred the fresh color with slow, careful strokes. Pale gray, clean and soft, like the start of a room that didn't hold whispers of late-night arguments or forced apologies. He laid out a drop cloth, dipped the roller, and made the first stroke up the wall. The old, faded pattern vanished under the new color, inch by inch. He found a small, stubborn satisfaction in the simple work. How honest it was, how nothing about it needed to be hidden or excused. Halfway through the wall, he stopped to stretch his back. He caught sight of a framed photo on the hallway shelf. Lena, laughing at something he couldn't remember, her arms draped around his neck. He stared at it for a heartbeat, the corners of his mouth tightening. Then he reached out, pulled it from the shelf, and set it face down in the box he'd marked donations the night before. A knock at the door startled him. He wiped paint from his fingers and cracked it open to find his neighbor, Mrs. Holloway, standing on his porch. She held a pie wrapped in foil, her eyes flicking past his shoulder to the half-finished wall behind him. "Heard there was some trouble," she said gently, her voice the kind people used when they knew enough to hurt for you, but not enough to ask too much. Ethan almost laughed. "You could say that." She pressed the pie into his hands. "You'll get through it. she said, matter of fact. "You're good at fixing things." He thanked her, meant it. As she turned to leave, he looked down at the warm pie in his hands. So small, so ordinary, but more comforting than any sweet word Lena had ever tossed over her shoulder on her way out the door. He shut the door behind him, leaned it against his hip, and looked at the fresh gray stripe cutting across the old wall. He wasn't fixed yet, not by a long shot, but one coat at a time, he'd get there. Ethan set the pie on the counter, its warmth bleeding through the foil and into his palms for a moment longer than he needed. He almost didn't want to unwrap it yet. There was something good about the way it sat there, a promise of comfort he hadn't asked for but was grateful to have. He rinsed the paint from his hands, watching pale gray swirl down the drain. As the water turned clear again, so did his thoughts. No more circling the same old questions about why she'd done it or how he hadn't seen it sooner. Those answers weren't for him anymore. Maybe they never had been. He sat at the small kitchen table, the one Lena had once threatened to replace because it was too old, too scratched, too much like the past. Now he traced the marks with his thumb, tiny notches from moving day, a knife slip from their first Thanksgiving, an accidental burn from when he'd set down a too-hot pan without thinking. The past was all over this table, but for the first time, he didn't want to sand it down or toss it to the curb. He wanted to keep it exactly as it was, proof that some scars didn't need to be hidden. After a moment, he peeled back the foil, breathing in the rich sweetness of fresh-baked apple and cinnamon. He cut himself a slice, the crust still warm and flaky. He hadn't tasted a meal made with care in so long. He nearly laughed at how something so simple could feel like forgiveness. He ate slowly, fork scraping the plate, staring out the kitchen window at his quiet street. A dog barked somewhere down the block. A kid zipped past on a skateboard, hoodie flapping in the wind. Life kept happening, oblivious to the wreckage behind his front door. His phone buzzed again, a single text from Ryan. Just 2 words, "You good?" Ethan stared at it for a long beat before typing back, "Better than before." He set the phone aside, not waiting for a reply. Ryan's own cleanup would take time, too. They'd both healed differently, but the break was clean now. No more secrets festering in the dark. When he finished the last bite of pie, Ethan leaned back, hand behind his head. The empty plate sat like a small trophy in front of him, proof that moving on wasn't always about big, dramatic gestures. Sometimes it was just letting yourself enjoy a slice of pie at an old table that had seen better days. He looked at the fresh gray on the wall through the doorway. Pale, unfinished, honest. Tomorrow, he'd paint another coat. Maybe tackle the bedroom next. Maybe replace the old lock, just to remind himself that some doors stay closed for good. And maybe, when the last brushstroke dried, he'd stand in the middle of this house, his house, and finally feel a home. By dusk, the smell of fresh paint and warm pie still lingered in the air like a quiet promise that not everything old had to be thrown away. Ethan had spent the afternoon rolling new color over tired walls, washing out brushes, humming to himself. A man reclaiming something he hadn't realized he'd lost piece by piece. He found himself on the back porch when the sun dipped low, beer bottle sweating in his palm. The yard was small, patchy in places where Lena had once insisted they'd put a garden she never bothered to plant. The swing at the edge still creaked lazily in the breeze, same as when he'd built it for a 5th wedding anniversary, back when he still believed a swing could fix cracks in a marriage. Now he didn't see neglect or empty promises. He saw space, possibility. Maybe he'd build that garden next spring, not for her, but for himself. Tomatoes, peppers, maybe a stubborn row of flowers just to prove something pretty could grow from the dirt she'd left behind. His phone buzzed against the railing. Another text from Ryan, just a picture this time. An empty corner of his apartment where Lena's bags used to sit. No words, but the message was clear. She's really gone. Ethan felt a strange kinship with the kid now. The same raw spot in both their chests, the same anger bleeding out into freedom. He typed back, "We're gonna be fine." He didn't hit send right away. He read it again, making sure it felt true. It did. He pressed send. Inside, the kitchen light glowed soft and steady through the screen door. His dinner sat waiting on the counter, just a leftover slice of the pie, still good enough for him. He'd heat it up, maybe watch something dumb on TV, maybe call his brother, who'd been dodging family get-togethers because he hated how fake Ethan and Lena's smiles had become. Maybe he'd tell the truth for once. He took another sip of beer, listening to the swing creak behind him. Somewhere deep in the yard, a cricket chirped. One small sound against the hush that had once felt like loneliness but tonight felt more like calm. He thought heartbreak would destroy him, but standing there in the soft dark, paint drying on fresh walls behind him, Ethan realized heartbreak had just peeled him raw enough to build something real again. Tomorrow, he'd start from the foundation, whatever that turned out to be. When Ethan woke the next morning, the house felt different. Still quiet, still echoing in places where old shadows clung, but lighter somehow, as if the walls themselves had exhaled overnight. He padded barefoot through the hallway, tracing the edge where new paint met old. It looked cleaner in the morning sun. A fresh promise, simple and unspoken. He made coffee, let the pot gurgle and hiss while he flipped through a pile of unopened mail Lena had left scattered on the side table. Bills, coupons, a card from her mother he'd never really liked. All reminders that life would keep knocking whether he was ready or not. He shoved them aside and grabbed a pen instead, dragging an old notebook closer. He flipped to a blank page. To-do list. He wrote the top in big block letters. Beneath it, he started scribbling. Finish painting hallway. Replace door locks. Call lawyer. The word made his stomach twist, but felt necessary. Clean cuts. No lingering ties. New sheets. Clean the closet. Dinner with Mike? He circled the last one twice. Mike, his little brother, had always known something was off, but never said it outright. Ethan figured it was time to stop avoiding people who'd actually shown up when Lena hadn't. When the coffee was ready, he sat at the table again, steam curling around his face. He didn't reach for his phone right away. No habit of checking Lena's texts. No frantic scanning for a lie tucked in sweet words. Just him, a mug, and the sound of his own thoughts. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered where she was now. If she was staying with friends, or couch surfing, or already weaving her next story for someone else to believe. He let the thought pass. It wasn't his to fix anymore. He checked the clock. Still early enough to beat the hardware store crowd. He grabbed the new locks today, maybe new house numbers too. Small things that said this place is mine now. Maybe he'd even stop by his brother's place, drop a six-pack on the porch like old times. He wanted to talk about real things, not stand around pretending the foundation hadn't already cracked under his feet long ago. He washed out his cup and set it to dry in the rack. The smallest, simplest thing, but it felt like control. One tiny proof that not every mess had to spread and rot in the dark. Keys in hand, list tucked in his pocket, he stepped out into the sun. No ghosts trailing him. No secrets at his back. Just Ethan, finally alone, and finally okay with it. The drive to Mike's place was short, 15 minutes through winding streets lined with sleepy ranch houses and tidy lawns. Ethan rolled the windows down, letting the early breeze rush through the cab, carrying away stale scents of old arguments and the echo of doors slammed too hard in the dark. He hadn't called ahead, didn't want to. Some things were better done unannounced. A brother showing up with an awkward smile and no excuses left to hide behind. Mike's truck was parked crooked in the driveway, same as always. Ethan pulled up behind it, killed the engine, and just sat there for a second. He spotted the basketball hoop they'd poured half a summer's pay into when they were kids. The net sagged now, but it was still there. Solid. Familiar. He knocked twice before pushing the door open. Mike's laugh carried from the kitchen, low and warm. When he looked up and saw Ethan standing there, his grin faded into something more serious, but not cold. "Hey," Mike said. "Well, damn. Thought you were going to ghost me another month." Ethan half smiled, held up the six-pack like a peace offering. "Brought breakfast." Mike barked a laugh and motioned him in. They cracked open cold beers at the worn kitchen counter, a clock ticking somewhere behind them, the smell of burnt toast lingering in the air like home. They didn't talk about Lena right away. Instead, they talked about the swing in Ethan's yard that needed oiling, the weird rattle in Mike's truck, the neighbor kid who kept mowing half their grass by accident. But the truth found them anyway, as it always does between brothers. Mike leaned back against the fridge, beer bottle balanced on his knee. "So, it's over, huh?" Ethan nodded. A simple thing, but it held the weight of 5 years. "Yeah." "Good," Mike said, no hesitation. "You look better already. Less stuck." Ethan laughed, surprised at how good it felt to let that sound out. It was bad, wasn't it? Mike just shrugged. It was what it was. Now you're here. That's enough. They clinked bottles, a quiet toast to honesty, to endings, to the fact that sometimes the people who know you best say the least because they don't need to. They sat there a while longer, trading old stories about high school trouble and cheap beer, letting the heavy stuff drift to the edges where it belonged. Outside, the sun climbed higher. A new day, brighter than the last. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like he wasn't dragging broken pieces around. He was just living. They lingered at Mike's kitchen table until the shadows started to shift and the sunlight through the window turned golden and lazy. It felt good. Just two brothers talking about nothing and everything, filling the space with laughter instead of tiptoeing around the cracks Lena had left behind. When Ethan finally stood to leave, Mike clapped him on the shoulder. Solid, grounding. "Hey," Mike said, "don't go shutting everyone out now that you're free. Come by for dinner tomorrow. Real food. No excuses." Ethan promised he would. He meant it too. He felt it in his chest. How much lighter it was to say yes when you weren't dragging someone else's lives behind you. Driving home, he rolled the windows down again. The wind tangled his hair, filled the cab with the smell of cut grass and warm asphalt. For once, the silence inside the truck wasn't heavy. It was clean, open, his. Back at the house, the fresh paint in the hallway greeted him like a handshake. He stood there for a moment, keys dangling from his fingers, just looking at the pale gray lines that marked where the old life ended and the new one could begin. He changed the locks before it got dark. Slow, careful work that felt good in his hands. He watched the old doorknobs drop into the trash, cold and scratched, and carrying too many late-night returns he didn't want to remember. When it was done, he stepped back and tested the new one. Solid, tight, final. He turned the deadbolt twice, just to hear it click. Mine now, he thought. Every bolt, every hinge. He took a shower after, washing away sweat and flecks of paint he'd missed the day before. As the steam curled around him, he thought about how he might paint the bedroom next. A new color, something warm and soft. He might even drag that old swing set down and build a fire pit instead. Invite Mike over. Have a beer in the backyard under stars that didn't feel like cold witnesses anymore. After the shower, he opened a window in the kitchen and sat at the table again. The same one Lena once said was too worn to keep. He ran his hand over the nicks and scratches and let them stay. Proof that real things didn't break so easy. He finished the last of the pie Mrs. Holloway had brought over. He let himself really taste it this time. Every cinnamon bite a reminder that kindness still found you, even when you least deserved it. When he stood to wash the dish, he looked at his reflection in the dark glass above the sink. Tired eyes, a few lines deeper than before, but honest, unhidden. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He just knew he'd open the door when it knocked. And this time, only the right people would walk through. And before he flicked off the light and let the house settle around him, Ethan whispered a promise into the quiet. Never again. And he meant it. Thank you for staying till the very end. If you love real, raw stories like this, stories about mistakes, healing, and starting over, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment about what part hit you the hardest, and don't forget to share this with someone who might need it today. Until the next story, stay brave.